Hello everyone and welcome to the 2Have 2Role podcast. My name is Oliver. Today Robin and I chatted with Matt Pennington. Matt is the managing director of Profound Decisions. Profound Decisions is a professional live role-playing game company. Matt is a LARPer, he's a LARP game system writer. He's also the one responsible for the Empire Lrp game that Robin and I have spoke about at length on this show. If you are watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. That helps the algorithm. If you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, leave us a nice review. That will help other people find us. If you need to get a hold of us, then you can do so through 2have2role@gmail.com. The contact details will be in the description of the show. With that out of the way, let's get into the conversation with Matt. Time. Right, Matt, how did you get into making LARP games? Is it designing LARP games? Is that the right term for it?
Yeah, making, designing, running. Yeah. There isn't. Yes, they're probably the. I don't know. The Scandinavians probably got a specific verb for it. I don't. How did I get into it? Years and years and years ago, I joined our local club. And the guys ran it for 2 sessions, and then it was a little more than 2 sessions. It was half a dozen sessions, and then they said, "Oh, we're quitting now. You're in charge." So that was a bit of the baptism of fire, really.
Oh, so it's like it was really like a dungeon master becoming the forever DM type thing, is it?
There was an element of that, yes, definitely. And then I just started getting into sort of national events because I was running a local club. I got really into the kind of big kind of national events that were taking place. And then politics happened, as it sometimes does in live role playing, and I wasn't involved in the national events anymore. Okay. So a group of me and me and my friends said, "Oh, let's set our own game up." And it really all took off from there. And for sort of 5 years, we ran it as a hobby, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I thought, I can't carry on doing this as a hobby. I've either got to drop my hobby or drop my job. So I figured I would drop my job. And we kind of finished the game we were running. And then I started up again as a full-time job. And that was 2004.
Wow. I love it. I love that, though. I love that entrepreneurial spirit. So one thing I'm curious about is that, like, how, because obviously your scale on, people call them fest LARPs, right? Yeah. What is the scale? Because if you are doing it full time, you need to make a profit, right? So what do you have to scale up big in LARP to actually make it profitable?
That's an interesting question. I think you do. I mean, that would be my answer. But then the people who run for a profit who don't run large LARPs would tell me I'm wrong. I've got friends of mine who run games, and I don't get into it with them because that that would be their business, not mine. But my understanding is they do it for a living, and I think they run sort of 30, 40, 50 person games, but they run a lot of games very frequently. And I think they keep their overheads very low and so forth. So there are models where you can make LARP work for less people. But I don't understand the economics. And every time I look at it, I think, how on earth does that work? That seems mad. Equally, I've got some friends who are running a kind of half a dozen game. They're running the same game sort of 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
And that's like £500 a time in a stately home. So you can run sort of deluxe LARP and in theory make a profit. But I got to tell you, if you want it to, from where I look at it, every time I look at it, the only business model that works is kind of thousands of people, mass participation. I don't really understand how they make the business model work.
Surely it's an accessibility issue as well, because you can make a LARP for 40 people, but then obviously you have to make the profit. You're going to have to charge a certain amount to give those small amount of people an experience. Whereas you make something accessible to as many people as you can lower the cost of entry. Surely.
I think Disney are doing from what the review I've read of it, basically is a Star Wars LARP. I think it might even be a weekend long, and it's either $10,000 or $20,000 for the weekend. What? It's one of the two.
Yeah.
Reading it is a pretty crap LARP. You know, if you were like running it as a LARP, you'd be like, this is pretty thin gruel. You know, it's very, very, let's call it old school. The plot sort of turns up and goes, I am the plot. And everybody stands around and watches it, and then it goes away again. You know?
Do you think LARP is not yet a very well-defined medium in the way that what is a LARP game and what isn't? Because I have no idea on that. That's the first I've heard of it as Star Wars LARP, but I can't imagine Disney being like doing the way you do it and be like, oh, here's some plot, now you make the game yourself. I imagine they want a lot of control.
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't see it myself, but my understanding is that when they were advertising for jobs for that, they were saying things like LRP experience required.
Oh,
so
really?
You know, yeah, so it's not true that this hobby sort of lacks definition anymore. If you'd asked 30 years ago, you'd be like, yeah, everybody's got a different definition of live role playing. But actually, it's a medium, just like TV or film or theatre. Lots of people doing very different things with it. But I think people have a good idea of what it is these days, or a lot better idea. And certainly within the commercial world, they have a lot better idea of what it is. You know, I'm under an NDA, so I can't really talk about it, but we went and spoke to a big computer game company that were looking to create a massive kind of online role-playing game, and they wanted to bring us in to talk about what we did and how we do it, because they understood LARP, they understood the relevance. You know, they understood why what we did would be relevant and of interest to their programmers and game designers. So I think it's not true that kind of everybody's running around going, what even is LARP? So surely people know.
Well, surely, I mean, the thing that comes to my mind for what we want to get from LARPers would be immersion, right? Because that's what LARP seems to be offering, isn't it? To something like a computer game, which they're always trying to be like, how do we make this more immersive and sandboxy?
That would certainly be my argument. I gave a talk actually just before we released Empire, talking about that drive for immersion. And my argument is that there's a convergence between live role playing as an entertainment form and mediums like computer games, like film, and the conversion, the thing that they all kind of in common is immersion. They're all trying to create immersion. That's why we have special effects industries. That's why we have, you know, ever increasing graphics cards, because people want the experience to be more immersive. But I think the moment you say that, if you're going to talk in live role-playing terms, people will immediately say, well, there are games that have got no interest in immersion. That's not what they're trying to provide.
Oh, really? Okay.
You know, and because it's a medium, it's, you know, people can do a lot of different things with live role-playing, which I think is, you know, is amazing. I'm not critiquing in any way. I think that that plurality is really exciting, and I think it helps make it a much more kind of interesting thing to work in, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like that'll be good for it sounds like it'll be good because the market will cater for those different things then. So say if you want Empire to be...
That's a different statement. You said the market will cater for it. I think the market wants immersion.
Market wants immersion.
Yeah, you know, they make all kinds of different films, but if you want to make a blockbuster at the moment, it's got to have superheroes in it shooting lasers.
And it's got to have a
eyes.
crossover. It's got to have a multiverse.
Yeah, you know, the market wants what the market wants, and I think the market wants immersion. But I think you can do artistic things that aren't necessarily highly marketable, and they're valid because they're artistic or they're, you know, exploratory or whatever. So the validity is not its marketability. But if you want to market LARP, I would strongly suggest you start with immersion. I think that's, you know, that's where the core appeal is.
So
it was the main appeal to us, wasn't it? That sort of the idea that you could be immersed into this other world and escape everything else. That's the thing that personally definitely attracted us towards it.
Well, yeah, definitely, because we've been into video games. I want to get your opinion on this, because we came in through like cosplay and D&D, and we were just like, oh, this LARP, you know, I'd always kind of looked at LARP, knew it was around, but then I kind of thought, oh, cosplay and D&D. Some people get they don't like the comparisons sometimes between D&D being just LARP just being a real life D&D experience.
I'm really excited about the fact we've got a lot more cosplayers coming into live role playing. I think it's great for the hobby. I think again they bring a really unusual kind of take on it. But I do think it doesn't surprise me that you would say we looked at it and it just looked like a mix of cosplay and D&D, because that's not an unfair description, is it?
I don't think it is.
It's like we're going to dress up in costumes and
But then it's like we're like, oh, we can do the cosplay thing, but we can also, which is only like short stints of kind of role plays, barely any role play in cosplay unless you're doing the skits on stage and things like that. And sometimes you do a little bit of role play when you're walking around the convention centers. And then D&D, you're all sat at a table and you're pretending to be in a fantasy world. So the immersion definitely for us was like, oh, we get to play in that fantasy world.
Yeah, and I think it's a big appeal. You know, what you experienced when you looked at it and thought this looks, you know, and I think the fact the visuals, if you looked at LARP 30 years ago, I've got to tell you the visuals did not look great. You know, we're all running around dressed in mum's curtains with the hole cut in the middle, and you know, it looked pretty ropey. And so from the outside, you're like, is this immersive? No. When you're playing and it's all in your head, it looks, you know, you're transported there and it's fine. In the same way that we can all play tabletop and it works. But now the visuals and the standards and everything are so much higher that people from cosplay or, you know, other backgrounds will look at it and go, that looks great. I want to be there. And that's why I'm excited that, you know, people are coming in from those backgrounds, because I think it shows we're hitting that level of visual immersion that people look at it and can imagine themselves being there, imagine themselves being in that world and think, yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah, because that's the difficult thing. So one of the biggest hurdles, I know you guys have a policy, is like the no filming thing, and a lot of people say that it doesn't translate LARP. I mean, doesn't translate great to camera. Is that a hurdle that you've come up against, like marketing the actual game itself, being like, well, we don't want to be filming people, but also film's a pretty good medium for people looking, going, oh yeah, I fancy that.
I mean, again, traditionally LARP used to look bloody awful on film. You know, we're not actors, and the thing about the camera is, in my opinion, it exposes the flaws very, very strongly. You know, the coffee cup left in the scene in Game of Thrones, everyone notices. Nobody noticed at the time. You think, how can you have missed that? But actually what the camera does is it pulls the flaws into very sharp focus. We're not actors. We and ah a lot, and we say some pretty ropey lines because none of this is scripted. And I think there was, you know, traditionally, often when you put LARP on film, it's looked quite bad. Now you can make it look great. And we've done that a couple of times. We've done promotional films. We did one for other games. And what we would do is we would get sort of amateur or semi-professional actors, give us some dialogue, and then pretend it was LARP. And if you then you look at it, and LARPers go, "Yeah, that's how my hobby looks," and I think you wish that's how your hobby looks.
Hey, in our head, that's exactly how it looks. Okay, theater of the mind, wonderful.
Exactly, though. The flaws that were then still visible is, you think in your head, you think, yeah, that's how it looks when I'm LARPing. You've got to take it to that level to make it look to the point where you think, yeah, that's how it looks. Whereas if you just film LARP, you're all a bit like,
And people look for a specific experience as well, don't they? So like, and it's difficult to be like, oh, if you come to LARP, this is exactly what you're going to get.
Quite. But ultimately, to me, it's more about privacy. We don't film because we just want to respect people's privacy. And there's no doubt, I look at it and think, you know, could we get a lot more players if we film this right and put it on YouTube? Quite possibly. And we've gone down that road once or twice and kept getting burned. You know, Unilad were going to do Unilad. We're going to do a big thing on us, and then they went bankrupt. They came down and filmed it all, and they sent me. I saw. I'm not supposed to say, but I did see the trailer they shot for it, and it was amazing. It was just stunning. I mean, if you think it looks appealing, they made it look jaw-dropping. They just made it look like absolutely like, oh my god, I want to go. So we were pretty excited how that was going to look when it came out, and then they got bought out by uni something else and got shut down.
How long ago was that they were doing?
That was about 3-4 years ago.
Oh, so that was before COVID.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well before COVID. Yeah, because Unilad don't exist now. They got bought by Uni Boy or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. There's a load of them. There's like Lad Bible and
Lad
things
Bible.
like that.
That's
Oh,
it.
is that the
Yes.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'll be it. Yeah.
yeah,
Lad
yeah.
Bible bought Unilad and
Mhm.
basically shut the project down.
Yeah.
And so that was that.
Mhm.
But the point is, we had to go through a whole load of effort to say to everyone, right, we're going to be filming here and at this time and do this. And if you don't want to be filmed, there's a massive amount of effort all for nothing. And you just think, oh, come on, what's the point?
Yeah. One of the best things about the game for us is that there is no filming, and what we personally like about it is going off and not feeling like you have to have your technology with you. Being totally immersed and in that, even though we like to make content, it's an odd one. It's not something that I look at it from, like, I try and put myself in like your shoes and go, oh yeah, what would I do if I was running this? I'd be like, I'd want film on it, but as a player, I'm like, I don't want film anywhere near my game.
It is such a strange feeling, really, isn't it? Like being at an event such as LARP and putting your phone off and putting it in the tent and just going away and leaving it is something that you never do during the day. That in itself really does help with that immersion. And yeah, I totally agree. Like having people filming, I think it'd be a little bit like, oh, I wouldn't be as organic with what I was role playing because I'd be conscious that somebody's recording what I'm saying.
Yeah, it would be intrusive. And I think, we looked at it once as a one-off and we tried it, and and that failed. But we ban it generically because I just think I'd rather give the players we've got a great time than be chasing more players all the time. And I think if you, basically, it's about serving the players you've got rather than chasing YouTube views, I think.
Yes.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. So, like, because growth is obviously a thing that you want growth, but you don't want you don't want an absolute explosion of growth either, and sometimes people can then be disappointed. I think this is what happened in D&D. So people filmed D&D actual plays and they went, oh, I want to do that, I want to play it, and then they actually went and did the experience and it wasn't anything like it was when they watched it on YouTube, and they're like getting together with a load of random people that aren't professional actors, and they then like, oh, this is terrible, and then they're straight on Reddit going, this is the worst thing ever, don't watch this show because it's not real. Do you ever get worried about things like that, for rapid expansion?
I mean, I'm always worried about the experience of new players, because I think it is, first of all, you can't explain LARP. You can explain it and explain it and explain it. You can spend 1,000 hours, but it isn't worth 2 minutes of being in the field, being in a character and interacting with someone. You will learn more in that 2 minutes than you will learn in 1,000 hours talking to me. None of it makes any sense when someone's explaining it. It's just like, you sort of think you get it and there's some rules and you're going to get a character, but it doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't. So I'm always worried about the new player experiences, because I think you're stepping into that world for the first time, and it's off-putting and disorientating, and particularly, it's all right for me, I am super confident, but if you're not super confident, you're like, what is going on? All these people seem to know what they're doing. So yeah, we always worry about the new player experience, and it's why we try and put so much effort into sort of doing what we can to support it. But again, in a way, you can't show someone how to LARP. You can't LARP for them. They just, you throw them in the pool and they either swim or they sink. And we try and give everyone armbands. That's really all we can do.
Yeah. Also, because you're doing it at such a scale as well that you can't hold everyone's hand, can you? Whereas, I don't know, we've not been to a smaller LARP. So when you started running these games, what was did you find it easier easing new people in when you had more control of, oh, there's 40 people, or is it just the same with 2,000 people?
In some ways, it's just the same. I mean, I sometimes say big games are just small games with more players at them. Some things don't really change. Once you're running a game and doing anything involved with it, it's so hard to reach out to an individual player and change the experience they're having. It's a bit like, it's a bit like putting a play on and thinking, that person in the third row isn't really enjoying this play. What should I do? Jazz it up a bit. It's almost too late. You know, if they came into the wrong play and this isn't their thing, it's almost too late. And then that's not completely true. And I have seen good game organizers find ways to reach out to players and bring them into games. And again, we have things like egregores whose job is to go find people and go, well, how about this? Could you do this? You know, so you can pre-build mechanisms. But even with 10 players, it's remarkably difficult, I think, to actually just,
I bet it's even worse with 10 players, because you're just like, you're very conscious that it's like sitting around a D&D table and then you've got like 5 players, there's one person not being invested, and then you're like, how do I drag this? But if you've got thousands of people, you're just like, hey, it might not be your thing, but we can cater for the majority.
And you that's exactly the example I was going to use. Imagine you're a DM and you've got 5 players and you think, one player's really not enjoying this. It's pretty hard to change direction middle of the game. Maybe you can do it. Maybe you're a really good DM, but it's easier often to chat to them afterwards. Go, what wasn't working? Okay, and so you try and talk to people and create new lines and stuff. But the thing, especially with new players, is live role playing is not for everyone. A whole bunch of people are going to try and go, this is shit. Just the experience will do nothing for them. My partner doesn't LARP. The thought of LARPing is as appealing as having a face sandpapered off. It's just like, it does not appeal on any level. She's painfully shy, and the idea that you just wander around and talk to people is literally her idea of hell. So some people will never enjoy LARP. But what you're trying to do is give as many people as possible in that kind of first weekend a good game. But
give them a good experience.
But it is terrifying. It's genuinely terrifying. The first event this year, with the first one back after the pandemic, we had 600 new players, and I was just like mind blown. It's like, oh my god, what if they don't enjoy it? What if there's just a block of 500 people wandering around going, what's going on?
What is this? Because we seem to be talking, like, especially having people like making friends, having people on this podcast. We seem to have there seem to be 2 people in 2 separate groups. There's the people that have been LARPing for a long time and came into it through like uni clubs and school and things like that. And then there's the group that we're in, the ones that through lockdown were playing tons of D&D and we wanted to get on about, and we're like trawling the internet and we all stumbled across, this LARP thing looks really good. What's this? There's a game called Empire. that's great. And then we had like a year to like psych ourselves up to come into LARP. Do you think COVID actually slowed you down, or do you think it actually accelerated your growth?
Well, it didn't do much for our games in 2020 or 2021, that's for sure. I mean, COVID definitely slowed us down. I mean, it damn near ran us over, is what it did.
Like a lot of people.
We genuinely didn't know if we were still running.
Gonna come back.
Because it's quite possible we go, hey, we're back, everyone, put an event on, and no one would turn up. I didn't know. It definitely slowed us down, but it did seem to build up ahead of steam. I mean, this year's growth was just mind-boggling. In a normal year, we would grow 5 or 10%. We grew 35% in a single year, which is just insane. And I think that is a lot of dammed up pressure and interest and appeal, and people over the pandemic going, I'm really going to go to this. Which one am I going to go? I'll go to the June one, or I'll go to the July one. If you're keen and you've got the bug for LARP, you're like, I'm going to go to them all. Once you're in, you're like, your baseline is you're going to go to them all. But of course, if you've never tried it before, why wouldn't you start with one of the summer events? You don't perceive that you want to start at the start and just kind of work. You assume it's just like an event you might go to and enjoy, and that would be a one-off thing. So I think we saw this massive sweep all the way through the year, where people were coming into the game, and I assume that will not continue next year.
I don't know. I assume. I want to go back and talk a bit more about like the inception of like Empire itself, because you talked about like Immersion and how that's kind of what you yourself were like aiming for. Is Empire like your magnum opus, like final form of what you wanted to do, and all your previous games you've you've tried stuff, then gone no, tried more stuff, and then is Empire close or thereabouts to what you've always wanted to build?
Every LARP game you run is fixing the previous one, in my experience.
Yeah.
Often overreacting and over course correcting to the previous game and its flaws. There are still some parts of Empire now that I think are overreactions to our previous games. But yeah, I've run or been involved, heavily involved in the running of kind of 4 significant games, and each one is built on the last one. But what happened with the previous games, what's quite normal in LARP is you create a game, you get it up and running, and it runs for a while. And over time, the flaws of the game become more and more obvious. And the bits that weren't really quite right in the design process, you think, oh, well, that's not right. And so you do what tabletop companies have done for 30 years. You go, oh, 6, 7, 8 years later, new version, scrap that game, we'll start again, we'll do a different game. We've tried to do something very different with Empire. And I could explain why, but essentially it's a bit of the D&D 1 model. It's like, let's make a living thing, and if a piece of it's not right, we'll take it out, redesign it, put it back in. And players always complain when we change something because no one likes change, and I get it, it is disruptive. But my view is that by continuously redesigning the game we're playing as an ongoing process, it will stay fresh for a very long time. And crucially, it'll be the best game I can run. I've always said I'll stop running Empire at the point where either players aren't interested, it's not making money, or it's no longer the best game I can run. If I thought I could run a better game than Empire, why wouldn't I stop?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you do that? you just so but yes, we've tried very proactively not to do that with Empire, and instead build it a kind of process for constantly
so
redesigning.
you do actually want longevity for Empire. That's one of your main goals, rather than because this is something I couldn't get my head around, coming in from like tabletop games and video games and D&D. Like we were saying, there was 2 schools of LARPers that we've been talking to, and when we've been like, oh yeah, Empire's like been going for a while, not been going for very long, and they're like, oh yeah, what would you consider a long running LARP? Oh yeah, well, they blew up the last system, and oh yeah, well, it's not going to last forever. And I'm just like, what?
They were like, why can't it last forever?
But it's like, so it's weird seeing like some people that are really invested in this world, and they've got these characters and things like that, and you have one crowd that are just like, oh well, that's LARP, the game will just disappear. And I really struggle to get my head around it, because I mean, I don't think it will, because if you build a setting, a world where people really love, it's difficult to kill it. Do you ever think about that? Because if you were like, oh, we're changing it, the setting that you've made, if that many thousands of people are invested in it, it might carry on in some aspect.
Very first game I was heavily involved in sort of designing and putting together and running, had a big sort of story arc with a sort of terrible disease and a thing and a thing and a thing. And to cut a long story short, after 5 years, our refs went round and handed out a piece of paper to 60% of the characters on site. And the piece of paper said, your character goes mad. You attack the nearest people. When you stop attacking them, you die. And that was the final moment of that game. It had, basically it had all come to a head. A terrible disease had driven everyone mad in a sort of 28 days later attack of the zombies. And everyone died. Rocks fall, everyone died. So do I find it difficult to end games? No. I think it's wonderful when they end. I think it's great. I think it's, it's, I don't find it difficult. I've done it 2 or 3 times. I've never found it difficult. I find it very freeing and very kind of
because stories need an end. Do you think
stories do need an end?
Do you think though with these because there's things get so popular that like say good example. Like, so like the Warhammer Fantasy setting, right? It like they went, right, this the tabletop's not making money anymore. Let's get rid of it. And the thing won't die, like, because people are still writing stories and making games, and people love that setting so much, you know, because at this point I don't know, I haven't actually looked into your other settings on this aspect, but but people have got, obviously, like, written, you know, they've produced and written songs in your setting. They've made actual physical costumes that are dedicated to your world. They've written books. They've done all sorts, you know. And if you like then just blow it up, that stuff's still there, you know.
Yeah, you're right. No, and that's a fair point. I guess I would never think of our game in the same sort of popularity level as something like Warhammer Fantasy Battle or whatever. But it is a sliding scale, isn't it? You know, the game I'm talking about had 500 players at it.
Yeah.
You know, it was tiny compared to what we do now.
Yeah.
And actually, there is something strange about Big LARP. It's like a mass psychosis, that the more people who are involved in it, the more effort everyone is putting in, and the more it creates this community and this culture that self-sustains it. So you're right. There would be a level where we could blow up the game one day and everyone would go, yeah, that's nice, Matt. See ya, we're still playing this game.
Or you would have just a big, like, what that because I mean, I imagine in that game, so what was that game called that you
the first one we blew up was called was Phoenix LARP.
Phoenix, yeah. So was that a little bit part of the setting as well? Did all the players kind of think, oh yeah, this is kind of how the game is going to go, and we're expecting it to end, or was it quite a shock for them?
I think the player that pulled the trigger and did it, I think they knew it was going to happen. There were half a dozen players with them who had a fairly good idea this is what the outcome may be, and a load of players afterwards were like, we knew you were up to something. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a bolt out of the blue. It was all, you know, it was a kind of twist in the tail ending, and everyone was like, we'd have got away with it if it went for you pesky lawmasters kind of thing. But it was very much, it was a story that we'd written. It was a piece of plot that was, you know, as you might if you were a DM at a table, that was kind of unfolding over a period of time. Empire is very, very different in that respect. You know, anyone who's looked at the game in any detail will realize there's no story. We haven't got, we're not, you know, it isn't going anywhere. It is, you know, the example I use to people is a soap opera. It's like Emmerdale. It's not going anywhere. You know, there are stories happening within the world that are going somewhere, but the whole thing is just continuing and living and breathing.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. But that's what I meant by I couldn't wrap my head around, because some of the, I want to call them veteran LARPers, people who've been LARPing a while and are used to games just coming and going, are just like, oh yeah, well, I can't wait. You know, I wonder what they're going to do after Empire. And I'm just like, it doesn't feel like they're just gonna, you know, hand out cards, because that's what I mean, like handing out cards and being like, okay, you're all gone mad. I mean, that would be, I mean, I would wonder what the player reaction would be if you kind of just did that at Empire with, like, right in the middle of the year, and everyone was like, wait, what? Wait, what?
They're crying, I think.
This is my holiday.
We're all very emotional in that game. A lot of crying.
You don't want it to come as a surprise. You know, you want it to come as a dramatic conclusion, not as a kind of bolt out of the blue. It amuses me, and I suppose it's a consequence of my reputation. Like I say, I've done this a couple of times, blown up worlds and ended games and gone. And so now when I tell people, yeah, I haven't got any intention of doing that with Empire, this game's here to last, people go, yeah, we know what you're up to, Matt. We know. You never run a game more than 10 years. And it's like, well, this time's different.
Because honestly, it doesn't feel, and maybe it's a little bit personal, because I do tend to get attached to things. I get attached to my characters, get attached to everything. That some people are just like, oh yeah, on the next thing I want to try this, but it doesn't feel like it's built to just end, you know, because it's especially, like, you know, you're building the popularity, and these that, like I said, you go on SoundCloud now, and there's just, like, you know, a long list of songs that people have written and performed about your world and about your nations and about your setting. You know? It doesn't feel like it's built to just disappear overnight. And there are people playing, you know, D&D, like, just like in your setting as well, you know, and it's just like that. This every week they're going off and playing in Empire, you know.
It's really interesting, because obviously we don't copyright any of the setting. So if we just were like, yeah, we're done now, we're going to do something different, you know, would somebody go, yeah, fine, we'll run it then, screw you, Pennington?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing.
Fascinating.
So in that vein then, like obviously you could end the game. Would you ever consider doing like an Empire second edition type thing where it's just like, oh, it's the same setting, but it's in this different part of the world or a different time period or something?
There'd be no reason to do that. I think if you're gonna, firstly, part of the joy of running LARPs is creating. You know, it'd be like running a D&D tabletop game for years with your friends, and anyone go, "Yeah, we really loved that game. It was great." Go, "Oh, I'll run it again." Then you'd be like, or you could run a different game. You know, that would be good too. There was, like I say, we no intention of bringing Empire to an end. We deliberately redesign it all the time so that we never get into a head state where we're like, you know what, we could run a better game than this. We're deliberately avoiding that. But if we were ever suddenly in a situation where I just realized one day I could run a much better game, I'd stop, end the game, write a new one, and run that one. I don't know why anyone would want to. I think creatively, artistically, people would go, that's pretty bankrupt to just go, oh, Empire Mark II. I think people would be like, come on, Matt, you could do better than that.
What was the point in ending?
What was the point? Yeah, it would have to.
Well, what was the point of ending?
Yeah. And then I know you said, you did promotional stuff before you released Empire, but I think obviously at this stage, I imagine if you were to be like, right, I've got this idea for it's going to be a better game, I'm assuming you would, it would be a whole thing like, like Wizards of the Coast are doing now with D&D. I'll keep mentioning D&D, but it's a good comparison. Like they're going, oh yeah, the new edition is coming, but we're going to start building the new edition like a good year and a half to make sure everyone's ready to jump from this ship to that ship when the time is right, instead of just going, okay, well, this is ended now.
The first commercial game I ran was called Maelstrom, and we spent £17,000 setting that up, and it took me basically 5 months to write with a whole team of people. And in 5 months, we wrote the rules, created the website, built the booking system, built the setting, wrote and published it all, and sent published copies out to everyone, and then filmed a promotional trailer, printed it on CDs, and sent it out to everyone in 5 months. It was a pretty hectic 5 months, I got to tell you. It was tough. The second game we did was called Odyssey, and we spent 18 months designing Odyssey, and it cost us £50,000 to develop and launch the game. Empire took us 3 years to design and was well over £100,000 in terms of development costs, promotional costs, and everything. So when I said earlier, there are reasons why I don't just think, fuck it, let's do another game. It's like probably looking at 4 to 5 years of development work.
And if it's growing, people are coming, right, to buy their tickets and spend their money. Yeah.
Are people enjoying it? Is it making money? Is it the best LARP game I can run? If it meets those 3 criteria, I'm just going to keep doing it. And I love the game. I'm really proud of it. I think it's an amazing game.
You should be. We love it. It's taken over our lives. We literally started LARPing this year, and it's just like, we're glad that we
welcome to the madhouse.
Yeah,
honestly, we live and breathe it at this point. And if we're not actually working on something for a LARP, we're talking about it, and we're talking about what we're going to do next, and we're anticipating what's going to happen next, so we're sending in character mail to people. It's just completely taken over our lives in the most wonderful way. It is a wonderful game and a great system.
Thank you. I can remember being in your shoes and playing games and being that kind of absorbed by them, and I think great games can do that. They can absolutely.
It's funny when you were saying like, being a confident person, and it's not for everyone. But yeah, I've got to admit, our new play experience was great. But when we first came into it, we're pretty, we're pretty gregarious people, and it was just something else. Being like when Time In was called, and everyone just started doing all this stuff, and we're like. I'm usually the one coming up and saying hello to people. I'm like, oh, everyone's doing stuff. I don't know what to do. But it was actually like, because you mentioned the egregores, we didn't know anything about egregores when Time In came. And it's only later we found out when we spoke to Maz and she explained to us what the egregores roles were. We understood that was what was happening. So our egregore came up to us, who we didn't know was the egregore, and was just, oh yeah, what's that? It came over and talked to us, and yeah, it was just, we were just eased into this fantasy world, and it was great. Instead of having like a whole meeting of just like, right, I know you have the new player meetings, but in role play, not having someone like come over to you and be like, oh yeah, you could do this, oh here's a quest board, go do this, go do that. So that must be difficult not to do, not to be like, oh, are these people having fun, I'm gonna go give them, let's make a load of stuff for them to do, you know.
Like you're like eased into it. Eased into it for Oliver was being there at the first ever event with no idea what's happening and being like, yeah, I'll head into the Glory Square and I'll sit and put myself forward for this role that I know nothing about, and I'll sit and answer all these questions from all the lords. And he literally sat and did that, and the egregore was there kind of like pushing us towards it and everything, and was wonderful. But that sort of that eased in experience was pretty
that's how good, because we went on purpose, we went in really blind. So like we got there and they were doing the general election for the Hounds of Glory, and I didn't even know the names of the armies, and they were just like, oh, we need someone to run against the current general, because they were like, oh, just come and give it a go. And I'm just like, cool, I'm here, I've come LARPing, I'll give it a go. And I didn't know what the virtues were, I didn't know what the armies were, and they were like, oh, what virtue do you and I'm just like, but I tell you what, it's such a great learning experience, and everyone in LARP is so, because they want the interactions. So it's not it doesn't feel like oh yeah, you don't know but what are you even doing here? It's just like, oh yeah, well, I'll explain it to you, and they want to explain it to you. Is that something is that an important aspect of making a LARP game, making parts of the game for people to get involved in so they can share it with others?
I mean, there's so much to unpack there. Obviously you desperately want a game where people want to role play with new players and want to bring them into the game and into what's happening. And as you say, it works in Empire because people want, fundamentally, what have they gone there for? They've gone there to role play, and so new players are just more people to role play at. And so people I think if you are new, you think like, oh, all these people look busy and they probably don't want bothering, and I might say the wrong thing and upset their game. But actually, 95% of them are just really excited about having someone new to life role play with. And where's your farmer? What's your character now? Oh, right. Blah, blah. You know, it's just another conversation. And of course, what is the point of role play? It's just a role play. It's the end in itself. So I think generally it works. I think it works well in Empire because it's set up to support that kind of approach. I think you can get situations in small games where it's very story focused, and the goal is to find out what the plot is and solve the plot, and then and win. Win's an odd word, but you know, sort of resolve the story, and then rather than being focused on each other, people might be very focused on the story, and then it can possibly, you can be a bit on the outside and think, you know, people are interested in talking to you because they know you're not actually part of that story. You're just another sort of onlooker to it. And so you can get situations where it doesn't work as well. And I think those sort of games need to have more mechanisms built in to bring new players in, and they do. There are, you know, it's basically different styles of LARP support different approaches, I think is what I was saying. But if you're building a good fest LARP, and it's so important, and I don't want to criticize, but I've seen large games with lots of people that are really 5-player games of D&D run for 2,000 people. And in my opinion, that structurally isn't well thought through and doesn't work as well as you hopefully realize it doesn't. If you're going to put 2,000 people in a field, you need millions of reasons why they would want to talk to each other. The game has to be based on the products of those conversations, because otherwise they won't have reasons to talk to each other, and then they won't talk to each other, and then the only thing that's happening is your plot or your story or whatever, which is fine if you're the DM and there's 4 players around the table because they've got your undivided attention. It's fucking useless if there's 3,000 of them, because you know, my undivided attention is basically useless to you at an event. It's just useless because There's 3,000 people. It doesn't
So,
mean anything.
so you've got to avoid it, because you can't, like you say, it must be tricky to be like, okay, well, that, you know, like being being the empress or the emperor is plot, but you've got to be like, we can't just make it a king of the hill and just throw thousands of people and going, right, here's, you know, you can be the empress, go, and then that's the goal of the game, you know, and not have everyone be like, right, okay, this is the end goal. How difficult is it to be like, because one of the best things about your system is the nations, and having distinct groups, and then you've got groups within groups. But what amazes me is that people cooperate. Was that why you decided not to do like PvP kind of thing? Is that why you decided to be like, right, you are an imperial, you like, that's it, you can't not
Very much so. Again, you're always correcting the previous game. I've always run games where the politics is very PvP, where players are ultimately competing with each other to become general or senator or emperor or empress or any of these things. I generally avoid games with very heavy story elements and very heavy sort of PVM elements. But we used to have a lot of PvP combat. We used to have, you are 20 opposing nations in a field, you all hate each other and all want to destroy each other. But for some strange reason, you've all turned up and going to chat this weekend. And actually, as the years went by, we sort of would try and run these games, and the inherent contradictions in them just kept coming out. It's like, why aren't these people just killing each other? Why? I mean, why
no
are
sense.
these? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And actually, as you try and make the games more realistic and more credible, the inherent contradictions in them break up and just cause them to fall apart. And so we kind of we built some other games, we did some other stuff, and we looked at it, and then we went, you know what? We've got this all wrong. We've got the entire design of what we're doing wrong. Players, the number of people who like PvP combat is actually quite small, because the problem with PvP combat is 50% of you end up dead. Every single time.
And a lot of people end up unhappy as well, like not having fun because they lost, you know.
Whereas PvP politics, you can lose and just come straight back next week and have another go. And we thought, actually, what appeals in our games is PvP politics, and what people love is having a really good scrap against some monsters at the same time. Let's do a game where everyone's theoretically on the same side, and there's some big scraps against monsters, and then, you know, what's really going on is the politics of, well, where did the armies go, which battle did we go on, who sided with who, how much effort did they put. So you've got this, you create an external threat that you can go out and have a fight against and have a great battle, but actually the function of it is just to generate more of that subtle political tension and play. And yes, without a doubt, it was absolutely deliberate that there would be an empire, but it wouldn't be one homogenous uniform empire. It would be, oh, but then there's 10 nations. You've got your loyalty to your nation, and you maybe favor one virtue over another virtue, or you care about your group, or maybe you care about your territory or your league city. You know, we wanted dozens of different competing loyalties because that's what people have in the real world. And we wanted to play and pull on people's kind of emotions in different ways. That is an epic painting behind you, Robin.
My tapestry for Avatar.
We got that at Disney World when we went on was it on a honeymoon when we went?
It was on a honeymoon that we got that.
I took she was 3 years old at the time, and we took her to Euro Disney. And I expected to loathe it. I thought, well, I'm taking, you know, my daughter here so that she will enjoy Disney, because she was massive Mickey Mouse fan at the time. And, you know, I thought, I'll hate the crass commercialization and all the rest of it. And I was absolutely spellbound. I loved it. Not in a kind of I'm in Mickey's world, but just as a LARPer and a LARP game designer, I was like, oh, I love what you've done there. Oh, that's so clever. The sets, their commitment to immersion. I don't know if you, it's just second to none. And basically, as I was just going around rapturously appreciating their professionalism and the craft that which they worked.
It's really interesting how they do a lot of it as well. I mean, like the Pandora sort of section of Disney World is talk about immersion. Like you are in Pandora.
Something else, isn't it?
It was because I looked into some of the research on how they hide all their buildings, and it's 2 tones of paint that they use. I think it's go away green and something blue, and they become invisible to the eye when you're walking around, so you don't notice all the construction around the place because it draws your eye away from it. I just think it's really clever.
I can just remember like seeing a piece of litter fall on the ground, and this guy just sort of appeared out of nowhere, brushed it up, and then just sort of silently disappeared. And he, no one interacted with him. It was like, and he stood in front of everyone, but it's just like he was just invisible. It got that ability they clearly thought about everything he was wearing and everything just to make him disappear. And I was just like, it reminded me of like the Japanese is it the theater where they have the guys in black that you can't see, and you can see them, but once your mind knows you're not supposed to see them, it just cheerfully erases them.
That's how I feel. It's like an Empire with the refs and the photographers. And I know they're there. I don't see them unless I need
it's the recall,
a ref. I don't see them.
It's your recall. When you do that memory recall of just like, oh, we were in this battle and this, that, the other, your mind just like deletes the refs or deletes the toilet blocks or something like that. It just gets rid of them.
But if you think about it, it's not surprising. My understanding of the human brain is it's processing absolutely inconceivable amounts of information all the time. Of course, what it's actually doing is filtering out 70, 80, 90% of it, going, that's junk, I don't need that, I'm going to focus on this piece. This is the piece the conscious brain needs to focus. So your brain is constantly filtering information. Our job as Disney's job, or our job as a LARP organizer, is to go, take all of that stuff and put it into the filter zone. Let the human brain filter it away. And then people will be able to walk around in that world, and their brains will just have removed that thing that is there.
Yeah, and it's like going back to like the filming thing, isn't it? Because I noticed like in LARP, it's a lot more subtle the way because you seem to flow in and out of role play. Because I know people kind of do it at the D&D table, but when I'm role playing at the D&D table, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm my paladin, blah, 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 and then I'm like, oh yeah, have you got a spare pen? And it's like I'm in my character. No, I'm not. Whereas in LARP, it's very much like it's flowing. There's like one sentence that's in character, one sentence that's out, and then after the fact, it's all filtering out. Like you said, it's just like when you retell the story of what we did on the battlefield or what happened in Senate, you're not thinking about all the little like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go to the toilet. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do.
Yeah, but I think even then you're talking about your memory editing afterwards. I think there's a live effect that happens at the same time. I think the key is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to eliminate as many of the 21st century elements as possible. And again, I've talked about this. It's not that the Coke can will ruin your game. But if there are enough Coke cans, your brain is having to do more and more work to make them disappear and filter away, and it's chipping away at your immersion. And so we put our refs in little yellow and black house coats so that they look just about passable for the game. The moment you want one, you can think you're a ref, but actually your brain goes, oh yeah, I can filter that out. Now previously the standard was to put them in very high-vis jackets, classic modern high-vis jacket. You go, well, yeah, cheaper, easier, but just has that little bit harder for the brain to go, take that out. And so you want to eliminate as many of those 21st century elements as you can, because actually it just makes it easier to be in the world, and it makes it easier to
we feel spoiled when we hear stories about other LARP systems that are maybe a little bit more old school, maybe is the word, that it's just, oh yeah, people just like walk around in jeans and trainers, and we're like, wait, what? What? You guys have a very good thing. The aspirational kit thing, I think, is a very good way of putting it, because that must be quite a difficult thing to. Because I guess you don't want to enforce it because you don't want to put people off, and obviously you don't want to create a culture of like pointing people out, being like, you're not being immersive enough. You know, how difficult is that to maneuver
Oh,
around?
it's incredibly difficult, incredibly difficult. Again, you're building all the time on the experiences of other games that you may or may not be familiar. Dumnonii Chronicles is a big game. It's been running
Okay.
for, I think, 25, 30 years
Oh,
down
really? Okay.
south. It's much smaller than us, but it's a big game. You know, have up to 100 players at the event. And it's all based on sort of Celtic legends, and their kit standards are to die for, you know, and have been for years and years and years and years and years in the hobby. Back when the rest of us were in Mum's Curtains, Dumnonii Chronicles were in kit that would make Hollywood actors go, oh yeah, this is pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so they've always had that, and they got there by being absolutely unequivocally, we want really good kit standards. And I remember chatting to one of their reps about it, and them talking about how great, but at the same time they got all this negative feedback around, you know, kind of perceptions of elitism. And I thought a lot about, well, how do you try and get what they've got, these amazing kit standards, but not try and try and avoid that elitism of kind of, well, we're better than everyone else, or you're not good enough to play our game. And so we kind of tried to hit on this idea of, look, it's aspirational. What we want is everyone to try their best, but everybody to be understanding that people start, and actually every costume is a work in progress. Nobody, you know, nobody has a perfect costume.
Yeah, because it's one of the things I was, because like I said, we came through like cosplay, and then there's cosplay, and then there's like costumers, you know, there's, you know, like the Rebel Legion, the 501st, and it's like, yeah, like you say, the word elitism gets thrown around a lot, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, you need this specific costume, and then within cosplay it's like, oh yeah, that's wrong, you've made that wrong, that doesn't look good enough. So coming into the game, we were like, oh, what's it going to be like? Because when you're marketing it, you want to showcase your well-dressed players as well, right? So you're probably putting out the high standard anyway when you're putting your pictures on, you know. So that's one thing we were like interested in, like, oh, what's it going to be like? Are there going to be people looking at our tent being like, those guy ropes aren't really appropriate, and then they wouldn't speak to us?
It was me fixating on guy ropes so long before the first event. I was like, they're the wrong color, they're purple, they can't be purple, they need to be authentic, I need to find natural ones. The purple ones were very useful though.
You see similar things in reenactment where there's can be a lot of kit elitism, like, well, that's not authentic, you haven't hand stitched it, you haven't made the waxy twine yourself from, you know, abandoned sheep.
Did you use a modern needle on this?
Quite. So, but actually going deeper than that, and again, I did a talk about this a while back. You know, I don't know about your experience of being at high school, but my experience of being at high school was I was not the cool kid. Being into D&D definitely didn't make you part of the wannabe elite when I was at school. And you know, my memories of that time was being emphatically told over and over and over again that my clothing was not cool. I did not dress right. I didn't look right. I didn't dress right. And actually, it is, you know, image is incredibly powerful to human beings. We are obsessed with our image. A huge amount of our identity and our self-worth is wrapped up in our image, and body images and all of these things. You think about in the real world, we are 100% now totally understanding of the fact that imagery and how you look is important to your well-being. And yet everyone imagines that because it's live role playing, somehow all of that turns off for the weekend. And when you think about it, that is utterly absurd, absolutely absurd. And that actually all of that kind of psychological weight and importance is going to be there in a LARP game, and people worry about it. I've bailed on LARP games that I'd paid hundreds of pounds to go to because I decided 3 days beforehand my kit wasn't good enough and I'd be too embarrassed to go, and I just didn't go. And so everybody can experience that. And I think so for us, trying to find ways to address it and go, minimum standards is no jeans, no t-shirts, no trainers. That's it. If you're hitting that, you're good. You're good to go, and you know, you're fine. And actually, but it's hard because people seem to want to either switch between all costume is bad because it's inaccessible and expensive and we should all be in trainers, to anything less than, you know, £1,000 costumes is not acceptable. And
It's
it's
not
like,
worth it. Yeah.
neither of those expresses where
No.
99% of the hobby wants to be. So
Yeah, and sometimes it is a bit of a like an illusion, or because we've had people like been talking, just doing this, we've just ended up talking to a lot of people from different nations, and one thing we do bring up to all of them is that you know, because obviously you've got like Wintermark and Navarre, and people seem to think that Wintermark and Navarre are the easiest ones to get into from a kit standpoint, but everyone we've spoken to in the Imperial Orcs and obviously in Dawn, the March is like, that's not true. You know, you can make an affordable kit and still be in this nation.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
totally. I find it frustrating when people think, oh well, this nation's easier to costume or that and so on. Again, years ago, the previous game we did was called Odyssey, and there were 5 nations in Odyssey, and it was a classical Greco-Roman game. So set in sort of antiquity, swords and sandals, gladiatorial arena.
Nice.
And it had Greeks, and it had Carthaginians, and it had Romans and Egyptians, and there was a Persians. Now, the thing about that game is that the official kind of recommended costume for the Greek warriors in the game was a linothorax, which is the classic Greek armor. I think it's made out of cotton, unbelievably, but it's got if you look up linothorax in Google, it's got a really distinctive look. And the moment you see it, you go, oh yeah, that's a linothorax. I don't know anyone in British LARP at that time who had a linothorax.
Who had one, yeah.
Nobody had one. Nobody had one. Greece was our biggest nation at the start of the game. Everyone wanted to be in Greece.
Yeah.
Scores and scores of people went out and bought or made their own linothorax and looked amazing. And my argument was, yeah, they were really hard to costume. People loved it, couldn't wait for it, couldn't get enough of it. So actually, half the fun of LARP is throwing yourself into it. Thinking, oh, this costume's, If your approach to LARP is to go, I'll play this because this would require absolutely the least effort on my behalf whatsoever, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. You're doing it wrong, because the point of it is to get invested. The point of it is to be excited about it and want to go, oh, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that from my character. I'm going to do this. Oh, yeah. If you're just going like, oh, I'll take this minimum effort option, you'll have a shit time at the event, because
you will
put the minimum amount in.
Because why are you even there? You know, it's just like, because I guess when you put it that way, it's kind of part of the role play, isn't it? Then, because you're saying, people come, put them like represent what they're feeling and who they want to be for that weekend through their clothes and how people see them. It's part of the role play. If I want to go out and be a knight in shining armor and everyone wants to see me like that, I'm going to be invested and be like, I'm going to get this, and I'm going to get some real cool pauldrons that are for next time. I'm going to get all this noble kit on, you know.
Many, many years ago, when I was at university, our Hall of Residence went to see the Rocky Horror Show. And it is, of course, tradition that if you go to see the Rocky Horror Show, everybody dresses up. All the guys have to get up in stockings and suspenders, etc. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'll feel like an idiot, I said. So our entire Hall of Residence went, and I was the only person there not in stockings and suspenders. Can you imagine how much of an idiot I looked? I looked an absolute fucking pillock. The only person in the entire theatre not dressed up. And it's like, who's the old one out here? The problem was, it's like, if you don't embrace it and don't do that, actually, you've not put in the energy, you'll not get something out of it, because you've not, live role playing only works if you believe in it and go, let's become this thing for the weekend.
Let's do it. Let's do it. And that's the fun in it. So I want to so you said the Odyssey, was it? Yeah, that you had five nations. Was that when you said, right, we're gonna have 5 nations? Okay, was that like the starting block for like the next thing we're gonna have? These distinct groups seem to work, we're going to keep with that.
No, because even prior to that, we'd had, the previous game I'd run, Maelstrom, that had, a dozen nations or more in it, and they each had their own costuming and theming and styling. We've always done that. We've always done that kind of, that's not true, actually. No, because Phoenix LARP just said, wear whatever you like.
Whatever you like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, Maelstrom was the first game I did where I said, you know what, this is a setting and it's got nations, and then this cost. And actually, when we did that, it was quite unusual at a national fest level to say there are some nations and these are the official costuming styles for them. Previous to that, people had kind of assumed that was too much restriction to put on your players, too much sort of. Yeah, I agree. I think you know, actually people want form. They want
because
they want to be part of something, and they want to show that they're part of something, you know, something they actually care about. Like,
well, the great thing about D&D, what you get excited about is you going, oh, I want to be a druid, because they get excited about being a druid, you know? It's like any character you make can be a druid in that game system, but they get excited about being a druid or a warlock. And for us, when we started looking at Empire, we looked at a few. I instantly looked at Dawn and was like, yeah, that's me. And I was just like, I want to do that. That's the thing. I just pointed at Dawn and went, I want to do that, you know? And I convinced Robin that she also wanted to do that. I sheepishly came through to Robin and was just like,
oh my gosh.
I was like, they have you know, they have all these nations. Look, you can be a little bit like a Viking, and or you could be look like a wood elf, you know. But then you ended up falling in love with Dawn, so it was fine.
Yeah, Dawn was the right answer.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find tricky sometimes, particularly for people from a tabletop background, is they'll say, oh, yeah, I'm going to come to Empire. I'm going to be a fighter, or I'm going to be a wizard, or I'm going to be a priest. And you're like, no. What nation are you going to be from? Single most important question. What nation are you going to be from? Much, much, much more important to your character, your experience of the event, and everything that will happen to you is who are you and where are you from? What you can do. You know, if you're used to a D&D style where there's 5 people around the table, who the fighter is and who the wizard is really important. You know, they can't mix those two up. Everyone's got a role. But actually in Empire, who you are, where you're from, and what are you trying to do is much more important than what can you do. Your skills are very, very secondary. And that's always one thing that worries me when sometimes I see new players and that they've come with that preconceived idea of what will be important, and you want to try and communicate to them. No, nation.
That's where the fun's. Well, that's what I found. I found that that's where the fun comes in Empire is. So yeah, we had Kyle on, who's in High Guard, and he said something that I really resonated with. We was talking about how he created his character. He's like, I wanted to be the most highborn High Guard ever, you know, and he was like, you know, he's so passionate about the nation and his game, and I'm just like, that's the perfect bit of advice, because that's kind of what we did, but we didn't put it that way. I was just like, I want to be the most Dornish person at the event, and the game just presents itself to you.
The game is deliberately written as well that if you embrace that brief and grab it with both hands, we think hopefully you'll probably have a very good time doing it. You know, if you're playing Dawn and you're just constantly out for glory, you'll find that more interesting than if you sat in your tent thinking, well, I don't think I'd take any unnecessary risks. You know, one of those two paths is going to give you a fun weekend, and it's probably embracing the brief. You know, if you're in Brass Coast and you're going to be as brazen about what you're doing as you can possibly imagine, just in your face, like, yeah, I'm doing this, you got a problem with it. You know, you'll have more fun than if you're sort of quietly thinking, oh, I'll not draw attention to myself. You know, the game is, you know, we spent 3 years designing it for a reason. It's kind of, you know,
But you've given like a place for people to go, though, because like I said, because we've had people, you know, friends that have joined Dawn, and they've just ended up in somewhere else because they were always. And when they say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm joining Navarre," and you're just like, "Yeah, no, you'd suit Navarre," because you just know there's. It's not as if they're like, "Oh, I'm not playing being Dornish enough, therefore there's no point in me playing Empire." There seems to be they seem to gravitate towards those parts of the game. It's like, no, I want to be a sneaky, stabby, run through the forest person, rogue type, and they just end up in Navarre.
Yes. We wanted to be able to try and give 10 genuinely different experiences with the different nations. I don't know why you would have them be all the same. Why would you file the serial numbers off and go, it's Dawn, Born, Gorn, lawn.
Yeah,
And
these
what
people.
would be the point?
Yeah, exactly. These people wear red. These people wear blue. You know,
Right,
and it's just like, yeah,
yes.
just again, these just like King of the Hill style thing. It's just like, oh, it's blue team winning. You know. So what?
Yeah.
So you said it took you 3 years. How? At what point were all 10 nations defined? How did you have a lot of them in your head already when you started making the setting?
No, there's a story which I've told a couple of times, but I will tell it again. It is a good one.
Yeah, go for
We
it.
got 18 months into the design process. We'd written tons and tons of material, but it was classic corporate stuff. We would get people together in rooms and go, right, everyone, let's have a thought shower. Let's have a brainstorm. Let's come up with an idea for a game. And we'd write things on big lists, and it was shit.
Yeah.
It was corporate. It wasn't that it was unimaginative, but it was forced. It didn't have a soul. It didn't have a heart.
Yeah.
It was a load of ideas looking for, it was the commercial vehicle desperately in search of artistic integrity.
Yeah.
It was, it was just soulless. And then a couple of mates of mine got drunk at a LARP again. Well, drunk. They were around the fire at 3 a.m. And they were sort of going, yeah, this is what I like about PD. And then the other one, this is what I like about my game. And they wrote it down on literally on a fag packet. And one of them came to see me sheepishly in the morning, and he was like, I wrote this for you. And I took one look at the piece of paper and I went, that's the game we're going to run.
Oh, wow.
That's it. We are going to bin everything we've done to date. And that thing on the back of that, because I could just look at it and instantly see it was a great idea for a game.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's it. And then so we just started again actually after 18 months. And some of the stuff you go, actually we came up with this idea. Let's bring that.
Yeah.
You then start to think about, well, where would that fit in this world that we're creating? But the game had a heart, it had a soul, because 2 LARPers round a campfire at 3 a.m, sort of chewing the fat and going, oh yeah, it should be like this, and the game should have this, and it should have that, and it was genius. It was genius, and I was like, that's the game I want to run. But no, the nations took shape over time. We got writing teams in. We tried to have a sort of quite a professional process where we'd have like teams of writers, and there'd be coordinators, and they'd work on briefs, and in theory we were going to winnow it down. There were only going to be 8 nations, but classic game designer fail, didn't have the heart to cut, couldn't find the one that you were like, oh no, they've all got to stay. Would have been a better game if we'd cut to 8, but we just
you still can. Just
careful with what you say next.
It's fine.
Which nations are you cutting?
Inject a load of plot and get the marches back in Dawn. It'd be fine.
Yeah,
that's one down.
One down. Yeah. No, once you've written them all and they're all written up and you've got all 10 in front of you and you're like, okay, well, which ones didn't make the cut? And you love them all. You've put hundreds and hundreds of hours of work into them, and you're like, I can't do it. I can't go, that one's the weakest, it's got to go, or we'll take those ideas and put them here. You're like, eventually they take on a life of their own. But it took months and months. And there were some terrible ideas that got cut along the way, without a doubt.
I bet.
Yeah.
What made you go for? Because it was one thing I really love about the setting, because I think a lot of fantasy settings have too much choice. What made you go for just orcs and humans?
Well, I mean, there are other things out there in the world.
Oh, there are, but I'd
yes,
like that mystery, you know?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a choice of just like, oh, there's, because I got to admit, at this point, sometimes in D&D, I'm like, if I'm running a game, I'm just like, okay, I've got to say only races from, like, I don't want to run a game with a Kenku and a cat person and a this person and that
what
person.
You leave out of LARP is what you leave out of a role-playing game is as important as what you put in.
Okay.
I remember years ago, when we created our very first game, Phoenix LARP, and we were like, it's a post-apocalyptic setting, and this and that can be in, but like, no pirates, no Celts, no goblins. And I remember one of the guys who was on the team going, you can't tell people no goblins. And I'm like, I think you'll find I can.
Yeah.
Can, and I'm going to. And he was genuinely horrified that we would tell people they couldn't play a thing they wanted to play. He regarded it as unethical to say, you know, someone wants to play this. Who are you to tell them they can't? It's like, it's my fucking game.
Yeah.
Tell them play my game. They could just
I'm creating this world.
Yeah. You got to put a limit. You got to put like, right, I'm trying to tell it. You're trying to tell the story. You can't just let everyone just run in all different directions and be like,
what you leave out is as important as what you put in.
Yeah.
You don't go and watch Star Wars and have, you know, Warhammer 40k orcs in it. It wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't fit. It just wouldn't work. And actually, once you start hammering everything in, you just it loses cohesion, and and the things lose value. You know, I've played in games that had a million different kinds of elves, and you only ever meet one of each kind, obviously, because there's so many different kinds. You're never going to meet two elves from the same race.
Exactly.
You know, and you'd be like, it's just a bit ridiculous, isn't it? You're all different. It doesn't make any sense. So I think with Empire, we were like, okay, what do we want, and why do we want it? Why does its function in the game world justify itself from the outset? And if it can't, it's not in. So orcs and humans were all we had, essentially, as the core races, because you know, we didn't feel we wanted more than that.
No, and then obviously like the fact that you've got nations is an amazing part of the game, but the other good part, the unifying part, is the religion, the way. How did you come up with that? Because I think it's genius that you've gone, oh, we're not having some like crazy dragon god deity that we all have to worship. You've basically gone, okay, these are like actual human things that you can all follow.
Yeah. I mean, I love politics in LARP, and I love religion in LARP. But you know, most of us who played D&D have come from a background of Greek style gods, the god of storms and thunder, the god of trees, the god of biscuits, whatever. How do you proselytize the god of storms? You know, you should totally follow the god of storms. What's he about? Storms. What happens? Well, we go out in storms a lot. It's just like,
you don't have a real reason for doing anything, do you? You're just like, oh yeah, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to go to war? Because the storm god wants us to.
It's just garbage. And if you're trying to build a game, you know, our company's called Profound Decisions, because the whole point about it is that the decisions you make in the game are important and significant and meaningful. For me, live role playing is when you are making decisions. It's like, if you're not making a decision at any point, I question whether you're really live role playing or really role playing at all. If you're not actually making a decision that has any difference, what is really happening here? Years ago, I went on you haven't done local club LARP, but local club LARP has a very simple structure. You go on what's called a linear, and you walk along, and you'll encounter a set of monsters or a thing that will come to you. And you'll have the encounter, and then you'll do some more walking, and the monsters will run away, change costume, and you'll generally walk around in a circle and come back, and there'll be another encounter. Sometimes it can be 30 encounters, just one after the other. And I played a character who was blind. He'd taken a vow of blindness. So we're walking and I'm stumbling along with this stupid strip over my eyes. The thing about being blind in as a LARP is it gives you a lot of time to think. You can't do a lot else. It just gives you a lot of time to think. So we go into the first encounter, and I sort of listen to the monsters and listen to what they're saying. I thought, I know what's happening here. I know exactly what's happening here. I can see the whole plot of this entire linear as clear as day. Right, okay, what are we going to do next? I thought about it. I thought, what we're going to do is we're going to walk in a long circuit, the sequence of encounters. We'll meet this guy at the end, we'll kill him, and we'll go home. And I thought, that is exactly the same thing as would have happened if I had no idea what was going on. And the realization that nothing I did was going to have any impact of any kind, not just on the story, but on me. I'm just like, oh, I'm not making any. And that was that realization that actually I want to make a decision. Now, we're used to a lot of LARP games. You're making decisions on information. You know, you're in the dungeon. Do you open the door or don't you open the door? Well, what's behind it? But actually, in the kind of games I run, a lot of the decisions are really, you've got very, very high levels of information, and the decision is, do you want to do this or do you want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a decision, it's a choice, it's a value choice. And in that world, religion is incredibly important because it's all about your motivations and what drives you as a person, as a character. So for a long time, since basically Maelstrom in 2004, I've been really interested in religion systems that are about beliefs in things and about things that you can proselytize and that you can embody. So in Maelstrom we had virtues, not that we didn't have virtues, sorry, we had gods, but the gods were things like the god of law, who's got a whole load of things about upholding the law and ensuring the laws are. They had a god of vengeance, which is all about hunting down perpetrators, and there was a god of I can't remember them all, but the gods were all about things that you would do in the world, and political objectives that you were trying to achieve and push and promote. And so you could say to someone, you shouldn't follow the god of law, you should follow the god of justice. You know, you could have that argument in a meaningful way. Well, what would it mean for you? Well, you would do this instead of that thing you're doing. And people could make value judgments and choices and decisions. And it worked tremendously well, except for the God part. The stuff about like the beliefs and the ideals and the principles worked brilliantly, and the bit with the God in it was rubbish. So when we were like, let's do the good bit and get rid of the bad bit where people talk to God, because you can make LARP look really incredible, but I tell you what, it's incredibly difficult to make a deity convincing. Really hard. They always look a bit like a bloke in a costume. Odd, that really odd. Really hard to make gods convincing. Better, and for no good reason at all. And actually, again, if you think about a game that's all about you and what decisions you make, the worst possible thing I could ever have you do is meet God. You're going to meet God and go, hi, God, what should I do? And God will be like, oh, I don't want to say.
Yeah, because it's literally taking your agency away. Because that's the good thing about the virtues, is that it's just like you have one called ambition, which literally just states, go do the thing that you want to go do, you know, and you've got courage, and so you can, you know, interact with these virtues, because it's like self-growth. So the more the more you interact with those games, your character will go through the labyrinth, you know, and it's stimulating game. Because I think that's what people get wrong when they do the world building. Some people enjoy it, but sometimes you see people, especially like if they're doing D&D games, they made this like massive Google Doc and it's like all the lore, and your players aren't interested in it because they can't really, it doesn't really affect them. It doesn't, you can't interact with it. It's not making them, because there's nothing worse when you're in a game and you're like, I'm going to be this great hero, and then some king comes along and goes, oh, well, I'm friends with this god, and you know, this god is married to this other god, and you're just like, okay, we're just like watching a movie here, aren't we? You know, I'm not being part of it.
Part of some weird cinematic, rather than actually using your own decisions and your own choices to influence what's going to happen next.
I don't play a lot of modern computer games. I play a lot of old computer games. I don't play a lot of modern computer games, but the idea of cutscenes just does my head in. It's like, so it's a bit of the game that you can't really do anything other than watch. What the fuck is the point of that? It's just like, that's crazy. But pay actors a lot of money.
Because obviously, I mean, we're talking about, you know, no age, but you've got to have some of those strings to run a game like this. Like you have to do something behind the scenes to stimulate stuff, right? So, because that is, I get what you mean with the video games, because there's the video game company called Telltale Games, and they make these like story games, and they had one like from The Walking Dead, and I think they've done ones with like Batman and whatever. But I was playing through their Walking Dead one, and you make all these choices, and I was like, oh yeah, that was a really good game. And then it was the second one that I played through, and I was just like, okay, why did I end up back here? I really didn't want to end up here. And so I went back and played it again, and every choice you made just led to the same damn thing, and it just totally destroyed my love for that game. And I'm just like, no, I didn't want to play it. What was the point in playing it? Because I didn't have any agency.
Because you realized that one of the things that's fascinating about live role playing is there's two things you can do. You can either make people think they've got agency, you can trick them, because actually the interesting thing is, if you only ever get to go through the story once, you don't know. Because you come to these branches and you think, oh, well, I'll go this way. And you don't know that actually, if you went the other way, it led to the same place because you're only taking one set of decisions. So in theory, you can trick people and have a completely no choice game where it looks like you've got agency. The problem is it's really hard to do that well for a long period of time in LARP.
Yeah.
If you imagine, classic example is our battles. Do the players win or do the players lose? Well, imagine if we'd already pre-decided whether the players were going to win or lose the battle. We've got 500 players volunteering to be monsters. If we started saying to those volunteers, yeah, the players are going to win this battle because X and Y is going to happen, that would leak pretty fucking quickly. Everyone would be like, that battle sucked balls. PD had already decided who was going to win. It's actually really hard to give people agency over a prolonged period of time that is fake but feels real. My view is it's much easier to do it by just actually giving them agency, just make their decisions real. But of course we could do that in a LARP environment because we can constantly respond to what the players do. Go, oh, you've done that, right? Okay, this happens.
So it's just reactive.
It's just reactive.
Yeah.
I've been running games like this for years, and both tabletop and LARP games like this way for years and years and years. And I always say, if I'm tabletopping as a DM, I'll write the problem. I will not write the solution. I won't even think what the solution is, and I will deliberately not even think, because if I thought of a solution, I'll be constantly judging your solution against my solution, and it'll be like, oh well, I thought you were going to do it this way. That way doesn't work. Whereas if I've got nothing in my mind about what the outcome's going to be, then I absolutely can. For me, it's the only way I can look at what you've done with a totally open mind, because I haven't thought about anything. And so, if you're trying to give people genuine agency in a story, and give them real control over the outcome, then your goal is to be able to assess, to react with a purely open mind, no prior judgments.
Do you get good at predicting though? I mean, it sounds mad to be like, oh, we're going to predict what thousands of people are going to do, but I bet you there must be patterns that show up, because human beings are all about patterns, surely, right? Surely you must go, oh yeah, I bet Dawn are going to do this if we do this, dangle this in front of them. We can be pretty sure that they're probably going to go down one of these two avenues, or is it just who knows?
I suspect that we are correct less often than we would get by statistically pulling beads. I think everybody thinks they can predict. I mean, whenever you're creating plot, you're always trying to hit a sweet spot where people are tempted. What you don't want is just something that's so overwhelming that you're like, oh well, that's just too good to be true, we'll just take it. If I say to Dawn, there's a giant lorry full of sweets and you just push this button and we're going to fill the glory square with money, do you want it? Everyone would go, so we just push that button, no drawbacks, you fill the glory square with money. Yeah, we'll take that, thanks. That's not a plot. You're not going to think about it. You're like, that's a no-brainer. There's no actual decision there to make. Okay, if I say, oh, but the money, we've robbed it all from the marchers and they're definitely going to want it back in the next 15 minutes. Now you'll be like, wait a minute. Not sure I want that truck. It seems to come with some trouble.
And that allows you to be reactive.
But the point is, you're trying to get this thing that's finely nuanced. Equally, you don't want something that's so unappealing, the players just like, that's just crap, just ignore that. And I reckon 50% of the time we get that wrong. 50% of the time, we either utterly undershoot and the players go, that's got no appeal whatsoever, and just write it off, or we utterly overshoot and the players are like, oh, that's a no-brainer, just bank that one and move on. The other 50% of the time, we hit something that's appealing. But the thing that's interesting is you will often see players comment before the game saying, that one's rubbish, no one will do it, or that one's a no-brainer, everyone will do it. And it's 50-50 bead pull from a bag, whether they're correct or not. They'll be like, that's rubbish, no one will do it. It happens. That's an absolute no-brainer, everyone wants it, doesn't happen. And so I don't think our predictive abilities are any better than our players.
No. You're just stoking fire then, right? You're just going in. Just going in and being like, oh, that they're doing this. Let's just like poke them in this direction. Let's poke them here.
But also, if I'm getting my craft right, I would want every single one to be so firmly balanced that I couldn't predict which way it was going to go. Because if I could predict which way it was going to go, I'd probably try and even up the other side a little bit. So in theory, if I've got my job right, I have literally no clue what's going to happen of any kind at all.
So that brings me to another question. What, just in a nutshell, because I bet it's mad. But what does a weekend look like for you? Like what are you? Because you're talking about plot here and things like that. Because I imagine, because a lot of this plot, because we've heard it from other people, are like, yeah, people are obviously your crew are taking feedback from what's actually happening at real time in the event. How much of that do you personally have to deal with in real time?
Really little.
Oh, really? Okay.
Really little. Yeah. So again, Empire is a game that's designed and we put thousands of hours into thinking about it. Yeah. And there's, in design terms, I think of it, before I was a live role player, I worked on oceanographic models. Models of the ocean. When you build a model of the ocean, you have a boundary to your model. And what if you're building a model and you've got a boundary, what's important is what goes across your boundary.
Yeah.
So you're modeling inside, and then you determine outside. You're not modeling. That's because that's what the boundary of a model is. It's the bit where you stop modeling. But what's important is what goes across that boundary.
Yeah.
Empire works on very similar principles. The players are the model. The players are 3,000 independent, randomly moving elements that no one can know what's going to happen. It is genuinely, in my opinion, it is a chaos machine. It is a butterfly flaps its wings and creates a hurricane, and you don't know what you think you can know. You can sort of go, well, I think this might happen, but you don't know because it's chaotic. What's crucial is not what happens in the model, because the model is self-running. I never have to go out and speak to a player and go, oh, by the way, this is what you do next.
Oh, yeah.
Every player is completely actualized. So that what matters is what comes out over the boundary and what goes back in over the boundary. The things that enter the game and the things that leave the game. And in Empire, all of those things are all carefully built in ways that we can measure them and record them and analyze them after the event, react to them, and then move them forwards.
Yeah.
So where are the armies? Well, the armies don't move at the event. They sort of do, because the generals have hours of discussion. Well, we could go here, we could go there. And then after all of that discussion has taken place, at the end of the weekend, they write down on a piece of paper where their army's going, and they hand it to a PD representative, and it comes out of the boundary. It goes over the boundary. They indicate to us that army's going to move there. We go, right, we update our thing. Well, now we know what's going to happen next. We'll feed you the information at the start of the next game. That information goes back in. So yeah, we listen to what's happening during the game and we get excited. Oh, that's amazing, they've done that and stuff. But by and large, we haven't got a clue what's happening, and we don't need to know.
No.
It's
like you say, the game is running itself, and then it's I can see why you've come up with like an actual empire, because that's like a representation of what you're talking about, because you've just got, because that's what empires do. They expand. We know history, empires expand, and if they get too successful, then bad things happen, right? But in this, all you need to do is just put in constant threats and just keep putting, oh, something's happening over here, we'll just put another threat from the top, and like you said, there's a boundary.
Yes.
Yeah,
totally. Again, a lot of this is is corrections from previous games. We had a previous game we ran where an important issue was who would host each event. Different nations would host, and the players would get together and discuss who would host the nation at the next event, and then they would make an announcement, and the next event would happen, and that nation would host. You think, well, that all sounds pretty logical, but guess what? There was no mechanism for the players to tell us. No way for the players to tell or to pass that information on. No way for us to know what decision the players had made. Now, for 2.5 years, we would run this and they'd go, yeah, great, we really like this game. And then one day, different people hosted the event and they were like, that's not the people we chose. And we were like, we had no idea you were even making a choice. It just, we got lucky, put it in the same place you wanted every time. And you think, that's mad, you must be able to know. But think what would happen in Empire if you didn't have the votes, if you didn't have those points where you interacted with the civil service and go, this thing is decided. Imagine if all that happened in the military council was just the discussion and the politics, and they're like, oh, we could go here, everyone would come away with a slightly different view of where the armies must go. And actually, and then we go, right, yeah, the armies did this, and we might get it right, but a load of players would go, that's not what we agreed.
Yeah, because that's literally, I mean, that's literally what happens on a smaller scale when you do organize things. Like so the Brock's Toll battle at E2, two separate teams showed up to represent Dawn. It was just like, we thought we were organizing. Yeah, I can totally see how that happens.
Yeah.
Right. And the interesting thing in that argument is, if those two groups go away, what would happen if both of those groups fought and one won and one lost? Has Dawn won or lost?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, there's no answer to that question.
No.
Each group of players absolutely convinced they've got an answer. But to you as the organizer, there is literally no way to, it doesn't even make sense to say there's an answer to that question at that point.
Yeah.
And that's, that's that chaotic noise that's just swirling around the system. And actually, if we listen to it, we just go mad.
Yeah.
Because it's noise. It's really, really important. It is the actual game, but it's not important to what we're doing as organizers. Yeah. We only need those signals that you're going to send to us through the boundary, the things where you go, this army goes here. We voted on this. This is a law now. We've declared this. This has happened.
Yeah. So do you think you've gotten to the state, because like obviously numbers have other connotations, but do you think you've got to the point now with the numbers, it wouldn't matter if it was like 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 when it comes to actually running the game in that way? Or do you think it could change?
I mean, if you'd asked me that 3 years ago, I'd have said it didn't make the blindest bit of difference. Because my view of it was, I designed the game to be played by thousands of people. How many? I didn't really think about it. I thought if we go really well, we might get 1,500 players. And then we got that our first game, and I was like, oh, wow. And then actually, because the first game was -9 degrees and the ground had 6 inches of snow on it, not everyone enjoyed it or came back. So we didn't hit 1,500 again for quite a while. But I was always of the view, like 1,500, 2,000 players, the game will be fine. And again, if, at the point where we hit 2,000, you say, well, will it be fine at 3,000? Like, yeah, no worries at all. Once you design for massive chaotic interaction, you're not really worried about how many chaotic agents you've got. If you put another 1,000 people in Empire, it wouldn't make any difference. Having grown 35% and compounded that and run some equations forward for a couple of years and gone, oh my freaking God, that's a lot of people. Yeah. I'm suddenly in a scenario where I'm looking and thinking, what if it was like much bigger, like 10,000 people or something? And I have no idea what that would look like. I can't conceive of the game on that scale. And I think the design criteria would all hold. I think the principles and the concepts would work. Yeah. But I'd be pretty arrogant to go, yeah, this game could work in a regime that I literally have never been able to conceive of or seen in my entire life. Are you in uncharted waters then? Like, is that what you feel like as a, what do you think about like LARP in general? Because I know there are other festival LARPs, bigger LARPs, but I mean, do you feel like that you're kind of on the forefront and they're the same and it's all growing, or do you feel like there's already a set kind of pattern there and you're going to get to a certain point and that's going to be it? Well, I mean, that's a lot of different questions. Yes, there are some bigger LARPs than us. The German games, the two big German fests are bigger than us, Conquest of Mythodia and Drachenfest. I think they're 4,000 and 7,000 respectively. Yeah. I really, really want to go to one day and just look at it from a technical perspective and get my head around it. But when I look at them from a personal perspective, I look at them and think, gosh, those are quite old school style games. They look like the sort of games Britain was running in the 1985, 1990, 1995 period, except really, really well produced, really well run and organized, brilliant German efficiency. But I don't look at it and think, oh man, that's the cutting edge of large game design. Right. Yeah. I look at it and think, okay.
Yeah. So you think you're on a different path then with Empire?
I think we're on a
yeah.
very, very different path.
Mm-hmm.
And my point is, are we in unprecedented waters? No, because I don't think 3,000 players is massively different to 2,000 players.
No.
And I think, like, if we got another, you know, it's insane, but if we were at 4,000 players, I wouldn't be worried. There'd be a lot of logistical things like toilets and camping and space and physical, but I think the game would work just fine.
Yeah, the game, yeah. But
I just wonder, like, oh my God, what
Yeah.
lies beyond that? There must come a point where something would be different, and I don't know where. But I don't think that will happen.
No. So you mentioned space and things like that. So are you is PD looking for a permanent site? Because that's what we keep hearing from people. They're like, oh yeah, there's going to be. They're looking for a permanent site.
Keep hearing like little snippets and everything, and just really want to know.
Yeah, no, we are an open book. So anyone who ever wants to know anything can just grab me and send me an email or poke me or get me to come on their podcast and I'll truthfully talk
and I'll tell you where to
go. We've been trying to get a permanent site for years. We got really close about 5 or 6 years ago. We did a big link up with a charity who owned a lot of woodlands, and at the very last minute, and I mean the last minute, it fell through when we had to find a new site with 5 weeks to go, which was pretty traumatic. Anyway, so we have been looking for a site for years. We were all ready just before the pandemic. 2019 was a fantastic year for us. And we were like, yeah, this has been our best year ever. It's been brilliant. Everything is fantastic. And we were like, right, this is it. We're going to get our own site. And we put together a plan and we had a whole concept. And it's like, yeah, we're doing it. And we were literally about to hit go on our sort of grand plan. And the pandemic happened and everything had to go into deep freeze. So then we were like, okay, well, and I was like, well, we'll have to wait till after the pandemic. And then some of my colleagues, well, we'll have to wait a year after the pandemic to check we've still got a business. So, but by June of this year, I was like, we've still got a business. Not only have we still got a business, but things are mad busy. So we basically created a new company called Unknown Worlds. We sold shares to friends and family in Unknown Worlds. We raised a huge pile of money, which is sat in a bank account. And I have been having conversations with land agents saying, I'm looking to buy a great big piece of land. I've got this big pile of money. What have you got for me? So we have been actively looking. We raised all that money in October of this year. And we are proactively looking. Now, I think it's really important to be clear about timescales. It will take us a long time to find a piece of land. It will take us a long time to buy it, and it will take us a long time to get planning permission to do what we want.
So because because we were saying that the game run, like you said, the game, you come from the game will run with a lot more people. And space is your is going to be your biggest enemy if you keep growing. So is that the thing that you're like, oh, we don't want to grow just too quick before we have the space for it?
Well, the thing about space is you can't really make more than you've got. So I'd almost rather grow and then stop in some ways, because that would be the easiest. But I don't know. Years ago, I've turned someone away from a LARP. I've gone, sorry, we're full. And they'd driven like 5 hours to be there. And I had to stand there and say, you got to go home. Fire regulations for this site is 120 people. We've got 120 people. You can't come in. You have to go home. And it was the worst thing I've ever done in LARP. It was just, and they're just sort of staring at you in a kind of, don't take my fun. And you're like, I'm sorry, but I have to take your fun. You've got to go home. So I don't ever want to tell someone we're full. But maybe one day the day will come. And particularly if we get our own site, it will have a natural limit. And in theory, it might reach a point where it is full and can't fit any more people.
But then surely you'd be able to run more events, because that's one thing that is interesting for us, because people, like, when we've got into LARP and people, oh yeah, you're going to come to a player event, you're going to come to this small LARP, and you're like, I would love to. They're all sold out because they're capped at like 60 people or 100 people. But so it's almost becomes like a lack of dungeon masters thing, right? There needs to be more. If there's more people wanting to play, there's probably going to have to be more games at some point.
Yes and no. Your analysis is correct, but obviously we as an organization run Empire. You know, what would it mean if we ran another game? Well, it wouldn't be Empire. And we, you know, firstly, we could put more Empire events on. Well,
Well,
yes.
yeah, so you just
but
have like 6 events than 4 events, yeah.
But what would happen? You'd only be able to get to some of them, and then it wouldn't be the same.
Because it's a continuing story, right?
It's a continuing story, exactly. You know, we said when we set Empire up, there'll be 4 PD Empire events a year, and that will never change. We will never run more events than that, because it's like, I want you to know what you're getting into when you play the game. I don't want you to love it and be addicted to it and me go, oh yeah, great, make more money, I'm gonna put another 3 events on in the year, and you'd be like, I can't spare that many weekends, or I can't afford that many weekends, or I can't come on. You know, I think that would be unfair on people. I think
it limits people far too much, and 4 events, it works. Well, most people can manage it, and
we mentioned elitism before. Like, sometimes that's where these things can get a bit elitist. You got the people that can afford to play the game because they can go to every single event, and the people that go, I can only do 1, but I feel so left out because I'm getting FOMO every time Empire happens and I'm not there, you know. So what other ambitions would you have apart from just having more space? What other things would you look to do in a new site?
Well, for us, basically, the goal would be to rent it out to other LARP groups when we're not running it. You know, for me, the goal would effectively to have like just this amazing quality event center with everything you'd want on it to live role play. Run the PD events there 4 times a year, and then just be like, right, what can we do for the hobby? You know, how can we help there be more great events to go to? We'll never run more events, but we can help other people run lots of great events, and you know, that would be my buzz.
Yeah. So would that mean like you're looking at doing like permanent structures and things like that?
Yeah, I'd love to. But just bear in mind that planning is not straightforward for these things.
Yeah, you can't just put up a castle, can you?
You can't just, well, you can, but they usually tell you to take it down again. We are, it's a long road and we're at the start of it. But yes, I would love to be in a position where we've got permanent structures, you know, beautiful buildings that you can walk in and walk around and LARP in. That's got to be the goal. And its question is, how close to that can we get? How near to that can we achieve it? But as our surveys show, 9 out of 10 LARPers want really good quality toilets first.
That is a thing. Yeah, that is a thing. I mean, one thing I've noticed about Empire is that, because you look at some of the, like, I don't know about Dragonfest, but I know there's like there's a couple in like North America, and they do have like, they have this mix of like a Ren fair, but they have buildings and things like that. And everyone's like, oh yeah, you know, they've got all these buildings and all this is going on. It's a week long, and then you like, you obviously you look at the price and you're just like, well, that's built into the price of it. One thing I like about Empire is that, yeah, it feels like you're in a fantasy world just with using some canvas tents, you know, which,
yes,
so you don't really need to go that far out of that, surely, right? Or would you want like a whole town and
the planning would never let you build a whole town, but it would be wonderful if the Senate building was a great big fully roofed building. It would be wonderful to have a 2-story tavern again. It would be great
tavern, that would be really cool.
Yeah, I'd love the academy for the kids to be like a real schoolhouse. I'd love the synod to have a great big temple that they could get together in and, you know, hold their meetings and discuss things. And I think you're looking for kind of signature buildings that can focus role play, and also hopefully help, you know, if it does rain, still have lots of really big communal spaces that people can be in and be dry. So, but you're right, you're not, there's at the end of the day, people aren't going to pack their building and bring their building with them. They're going to pack their tent and bring their tent, and you still want that. You want to encourage that. You want to encourage that level of immersion, and because it's back to what we talked about. The thing about Disney, and the thing that's interesting about Disney, you know, Euro Disney, is it's a completely passive experience. You go, you turn up, you wander around, you look at the pretty things, you go home. Live role playing is a fundamentally participatory experience. it starts with you thinking about, what am I going to wear? Who am I? What's my name? And from the moment you walk in, it's about you and what you're doing. It's not about looking at the pretty things. And so we're always going to want people to bring beautiful tents and set dress them, not just because it adds to the game, but because actually that's part of the fun of everything that you're doing.
Yes, it really is.
No, it's part of the fun. Yeah, I mean, one thing that Disney do, they kind of they obviously like annex everything, and you look at the layouts of their part. If you consider doing, so obviously if you have your own space, you'll be able to organize where everything goes. Because I was thinking about this the other day because people were panicking about camping space and things like that. Have you, if you had like buildings, because this is just what I have in my mind, if you have like actual buildings, like say you have the Senate, would you have like, you could have like a center point, and then be like, right, okay, all the nations are kind of annexed out, and then they can just kind of expand out the back or something.
Yes, that would be the ideal if the site allows it. But we gotta get a piece of land first.
Yeah, well,
land's not cheap. And,
no, certainly not. Is there a certain part of the country? Because obviously you've been. How long have you been at Dadford?
Quite a while, actually. Been there about 5 years now, and we were at a similar site round the corner before that for 3 or 4 years. So we've been in that area for a long time.
Yeah.
But I will be honest, and those from the south won't be excited. The A50 corridor is our target goal. The Shropshire to Leicestershire, between the M6 and the M1, and that, so that the people coming from Scotland with their 7-hour drives, if they got 2 hours off their drive, I'd be a very happy person.
Because I mean, it's a lovely, lovely.
I don't know where you guys are based. So
no, we're Gloucestershire, so it's only like we're only like an hour and a half away. But we did live in the northeast of Scotland, so coming down.
We were like right up at Aberdeen, and we used to drive down to like Comic Cons and everything. And you're talking like between 7 and 10 hours of driving.
Oh, it was a whole excursion. It wasn't just
heavily limits what you could do.
Yeah, you had to get flights, and then you had to like get the dog in the kennel for 5 days, just literally for a weekend.
That's why if we could just shift north of Birmingham, and hit that corridor, I'd be really happy.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
I'm super excited. So you're not gonna blow up our favorite thing in the next year. It sounds like. Oh, good. I'm happy.
No, because with the best will in the world, Empire is the cash machine that would make the site work. It would be quite a risk to take all of my friends' money and go, I'm going to sink it into this giant LARP site. Oh, I'm going to blow my game up at the same time. The thing that pays all the bills that make all of this work. I've got some, I'll take some big risks in my life, but that's not one I'm planning on right now.
I'm pretty sure people won't be happy. You're like, oh, I've got this Space Marine game idea that I'm going to do. Let's tear it all down.
Yeah, no. And indeed, actually, once you get your own site, it does strongly encourage you. If you're going to build a building, you'd build a Senate. So at that point where you've got a Senate now, so and so in theory, it would make us more static, but that's all right, because I don't have any plans to change at this point.
But I'm pretty confident. Like I was saying, like there seems to be people seem to want to go to LARPs, whether it's an Empire event, whether it's an Empire player event. There's loads of them popping up. Like I said, they're all full. So I'm pretty sure that if you just ran your 4 events and you had, like you said, it makes you static, but I'm pretty sure if you have land there and like, hey, run your LARPs here, I'm pretty sure it would be full every weekend. I can't imagine.
We hope so. We'll see. It's a long way. We're wish casting and thinking about like all the tomorrows, but if we can make it happen, it'll be pretty cool. But it's
so we'll continue getting people like involved in it. It's just like, I feel bad because we're telling everyone, we're like, oh, we've discovered this thing, it's like the best thing ever, and then people are like, oh, there's not enough room in the campsite for everyone to be in the campsite. I'm like, oh, maybe we should stop telling people. It's not got to that stage yet.
No, we are. It's like I say, we've been trying to do this for years, but 2019, we got to the point where we're going, you know what, this is actually economically viable to buy to site. 2022, we were like, oh my God. Every player that comes into the game makes that dream of a permanent site a bigger reality, basically, more likely to happen. So
Fantastic! I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what happens. That's the other thing I'm loving about LARP as well, and the type of game that like Empire is. It's a game that you can play at any stage of your life, you know. So it just, even if I'm like, hey, you know, I'm perfectly happy to play this for years, even if I get to a stage where I can't go out and fight and do the fighty things, there's tons to explore, you know. And that's the thing. If it did blow up tomorrow, I'd be like, oh, never got to experience that part of it, you know.
Yeah, there really is something for absolutely everyone, no matter, like you said, no matter what age someone is, what their physical abilities are. There's something there for everyone. And I think that's one of the main things that we've come across with speaking to people is we're like, oh, we LARP now and it's amazing. And the main thing I get back from people is, oh, I don't really want to go fighting. And it's like, you don't have to. There is so much happening and there is so much game. And like Oliver just said, I would be gutted if I wasn't able to experience all the different parts of the game eventually at some point. Maybe.
I guess as an organizer, you worry that eventually people will run out of bits of the game they want to play. People that, in my experience, run out of the game at different rates. But it goes back to the three things. If players want to play it, if it's making money, if it's the best game we can run. We've never, so, you know, I think Empire will be around for a very long time to come. And also, I'm 51. It took 3 years to make Empire. You got to sort of look at the numbers and think, how long are you going to run this game for, Matt? You know, retiring, it's like, I'm quite happy that Empire is probably the last game I'm ever going to run. And I'm pretty
sure you want this to be your final form, you know.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
Well, I hope it continues, because we've had a blast, haven't we, Robin, this last year. It's been amazing, and we've got this amazing community around it as well, you know.
It is the best community we've ever been part of. And it's so mind-blowing, especially coming from things such as cosplay and D&D and things like that, to come into a community like this that is welcoming to everyone, whether you have been LARPing for years or whether you have just heard about it. It is as welcoming, which is a wonderful experience, especially for new people coming in.
I am incredibly proud of the community. I think and I think, you know, I think a lot about, you know, I think it's one of the things we miss in real life. We are so atomized, and, you know, everything is so corporate and so transactional, and we go to work and we earn our money and we come home. And one of the things that people miss in real life is a sense of community. You want that sense of people who will support you and help you, and you can help them, and it means something and it achieves something. And live role playing gives a community. It lets us, and sometimes that can be bad. People can overstate the value of it, but it gives you something that you can work with and support and be supported by. And like you say, they're incredibly welcoming to new players. And that long may that last. I would obviously, as from a business point of view, I want the community to welcome new players. That's like a no-brainer. But it's also, this is still my passion. It's my hobby. I'm part of this community. You know, if it wasn't open to new people, I'd be like, what's wrong with us? Where have we lost our way? Because, you know, bringing people into live role playing is part of the pleasure of it. And actually, your first live role-playing game is amazing. You've never done this before. You've never seen it before. You're just like, this is incredible. But with the best one in the world, those of us who've been doing it 30 years can get pretty fucking cynical and a bit, I've seen it all before. And the moment you're cynical, LARP doesn't work. It doesn't work for you. Really, you've got to be a wide-eyed child staring at this mystical world of wonder. So new players make the game better for everybody because they breathe that kind of raw, vital enthusiasm, and that kind of, they're just clearly spellbound by it, and that makes it magic for everybody else as well. So actually, I think it's one of the joys of LARP, and one of the reasons I hope that perhaps one of the reasons we're so welcoming is because I think instinctively we know that, like, they will make the game better. You know, you don't really need skill to LARP. It's just a game of make-believe. You know, my kid was, every baby, first skill they learn is how to role play. They pretend to be shopkeepers or cowboys but, you know, kids can role play, adults forget. That is my view of the world. You know, humans are born able to role play. We just forget how to do it as we get older.
Yeah.
And once you get there, there's no skill involved. It's not like, are you a good role player? You can have a bit of charisma, you can have a bit of presence and be really good at getting people involved. But fundamentally, there's no skill to it. There's no technical expertise. It's not like tennis where you've got to be able to get the ball back over the net. Anyone can do it. But what you need is that enthusiasm and that passion. And if you come into it excited and like, oh my God, I want to do this and I want to do that, everyone around you, their game will be made better by that enthusiasm. So new players make the game better for old players.
Yeah,
that's my view.
It's wonderful sentiment through there. Actually,
yeah. And it's good that you guys are very much part of your community, because that's the thing that I think people, especially new people coming in, like they must come in going, oh well, there's like thousands of people, and they must think that you guys are some massive corporate machine when in reality you are a small business. That's just me coming from someone who owns a small business, because there's not very many of you, and you are actually a small business. It's not, I think people go, oh yeah, why isn't there this, why isn't this, and then you get back to them and they're like, oh right, oh okay, and it's just like, well yeah, it's just a small business giving a game to people, you know.
Yes, totally.
But you're not at the level where you're just shouting into the ether if you're not happy with something. Like,
you know? Well, I do a lot of shouting into the ether, but it doesn't do any good.
Yeah, but it's funny because I've seen sometimes things will like happen on forums or Facebook and things like that, and then they'll be discussing, and then you'll like pop up being like, oh hey, and then you'll put, and then everyone's like, oh all right, we didn't realize Matt Matt was actually looking at the stuff,
watching.
We don't want to do a big brother thing, but I do want to be part of the community.
Yeah, you are.
I answer every single email that I'm sent, because it's so important to be accessible and available and having conversations. I make an effort, a real conscious effort, to go to other games and play them and enjoy them, because I want to be embedded in the community and just another LARPer for no other reason than it will make me run better games. And I want to run the best games I can. So, but LARP works best when you've got that sense of community. Nobody wants it. I'm sure it works well for Disney with their Disney Star Wars experience, where the best one in the world, it's a corporate thing and you tick your ticket and you get your experience. But what makes live role playing unique is that's not what is happening. It is a community creating a game together. And I'm, I never forget two things. First of all, yes, we're a small company with like half a dozen employees, and we're the least important part of PD. Right, without a shadow of a doubt, you could swap us out and the game would carry on. The 400 volunteer crew, the game couldn't happen without them. If they weren't there, the game would die in an instant. So they are much more important than us in terms of making it happen. And then you got your players. How good do you think the game would be if you two turned up and you were the only two there? It'd be punk, is what it would be. It would be rubbish.
We give it a good go.
Rubbish. You give it your best shot. They'll be like, what the fuck is this rubbish? It makes no sense. The game is fundamentally, and that goes back all the time to Disney. You go and watch the experience. If you were the only person there, it would lack the ambience and the atmosphere, but it would still be fundamentally the same experience. You'd be going there, you'd be watching Mickey Mouse do his little Mickey Mouse dance. It'd be the same thing. LARP is fundamentally participatory. The community creates the experience that the community enjoy. So the single most important element to everything we do is the players who play the game, because they are the people generating the game that everyone plays. If the community is wrong in some way, and by that I mean is toxic or isn't welcoming to strangers. I don't mean wrong in a technical sense where they think 3 + 4 is 8. I mean wrong in a kind of morally kind of isn't open and welcoming and inviting and supportive. Then that would just fuck the game up. It would just be a less good game. So we try to be the best custodians we can, and try to be sort of kind of like little leaders in the community, going, hey everyone, let's do this is the right thing to do. And you can't always get that right, and you don't always get what people want, and but we try.
You can't please everyone.
You can't please everyone.
Can't please everyone. but I'm glad you're continuing to do it. Anyway, we've gone over time.
We have, yes.
Yeah,
I'm
we've gone over
poked.
time. We'll because I know you're busy. You've got sites to buy and plot to write. I'm sure whatever it is you do over the winter time. Make our game great. Thank you very much for coming on, Matt. We will say goodbye to the podcast first. See you later, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Really enjoyed that. Great to chat.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you follow and subscribe so you know when the next episode is going to be posted. If you want to know more about Profound Decisions and Empire, we will put details in the description. Until next time, we love you and stay safe.